Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the hidden, completely counterintuitive economics behind a place you probably visit all the time, your local neighborhood pharmacy. You picture this steady line of regular customers selling essential everyday products, and it just seems like a perfectly recession-proof business model, right? Well, as we're going to see, the financial reality of running a pharmacy is actually packed with shocking paradoxes and hidden traps. So let's open up the books and find out what's really going on behind the counter. So, here's a question for you. If literally everyone takes medicine at some point, why on earth do pharmacies actually lose money? It totally shatters this illusion that pharmacies are just endless cash cows. I mean, you might assume brand name drugs are bringing in big bucks, but the reality? Back in 2023, more than 80% of prescriptions filled in the US for low-margin generic drugs. You can perfectly fill a prescription, follow every single rule, and still lose money the very moment the paperwork clears. To figure out why, we kind of need to start right at the beginning of a pharmacy's lifespan.
Section 1. Business illusion. The perfect setup.
Before a single pill is ever dispensed, and honestly, before a single patient even walks through the door, independent pharmacy owners are staring down some massive upfront financial hurdles. I mean, try to wrap your head around this number, $647,000. That is the estimated total cash you need by just month 6 of opening a brand new independent pharmacy. And a huge chunk of that, we're talking up to $100,000, goes purely to opening inventory. You've got to have the right drugs in the exact right quantities, literally just sitting on a shelf waiting for a prescription that might not even come in for a month.
And the path to actually opening, it is definitely not fast. You're looking at 2 to 4 long months just for DEA and state licensing, and then up to 3 more months for Medicare and Medicaid enrollment, plus the whole physical build-out of the store. And since time is money, every single month of delay means paying rent, paying insurance, and paying off loans with zero revenue coming in. A business can easily bleed cash for up to 10 months just waiting to officially open its doors. But once those doors finally do open, who actually determines what you get paid?
Section 2. Invisible middlemen. Meet the PBMs.
All right, to really understand how this works, we have to talk about a completely hidden force that basically controls the cash flow of the entire pharmacy industry. I'm talking about the PBM, or Pharmacy Benefit Manager. These are corporate middlemen hired by insurance plans, and their whole job is to dictate exactly how much a pharmacy gets reimbursed for dispensing a drug. And here's the craziest part. PBMs never even touch the medicine. They never see the patient. Yet, through these incredibly dense contracts that are literally thousands of pages long, they hold all the pricing power. They decide, down to the penny, if the pharmacy makes a profit or takes a devastating loss.
And pharmacies have absolutely zero negotiating leverage here. Just breaking down the market share tells you why. Express Scripts holds 30%, CVS Caremark has 27%, and Optum Rx has 23%. So 3 companies control 80% of the entire national prescription market. When just 3 players control that much of your potential customer base, you simply don't negotiate. You just accept what's offered, or you're forced to stop filling prescriptions for the vast majority of your neighborhood.
Section 3. Reimbursement Trap. Losing on purpose.
Let's actually look at the math of how a pharmacy loses money. Say a pharmacy pays a wholesaler $150 to acquire a medication. The PBM then turns around and reimburses the pharmacy only $140. This is what the industry calls negative reimbursement. So you're probably wondering, why would a pharmacy ever agree to this deal? Well, it's pretty simple. They take this mathematical loss just to keep the patient from walking away for good. If they turn that patient away today, they lose the rest of that entire family's business forever. But wait, it gets even tougher. There's something called direct and indirect remuneration, or DIR fees, and these grew by more than 100,000% between 2010 and 2020. These are essentially brutal, retroactive clawbacks. A PBM could literally swoop into a pharmacy's bank account months after a transaction is completely finished and just take back a percentage of what was already paid out. Just imagine running a shop where every single sale you make might be secretly discounted months later, without anyone even giving you a heads up.
And then we have to factor in the specialty drug risk. These are the complex drugs for things like cancer or rare genetic conditions. Now, they account for only 4% of total prescriptions, but they consume a whopping 70% of nationwide prescription spending. Plus, they're incredibly expensive to store and ship, often requiring strict cold chain monitoring. So the key takeaway here is that while they represent massive potential revenue, they exponentially magnify that negative reimbursement trap we just talked about. In one documented case, an independent pharmacy lost $11,000 on a single fill. That's one patient, one fill, and $11,000 just gone.
Section 4. Real profit sources beyond the pills. So if the drugs themselves are this financially dangerous, we really have to ask, where does the money actually come from? Well, the reality of this zero-sum survival math is pretty shocking. An average independent pharmacy might pull in an impressive-sounding $3 million in total revenue, but after you pay for the actual drugs, you're left with a gross margin of maybe 21 to 22%. Then you've got to pay rent, labor, and insurance, which slices your net margin down to a tiny 2 to 5%. That leaves an actual profit of just $60,000 to $150,000 for the entire year. And that has to cover the owner's salary, plus the massive risks they took just to open up shop.
Which brings us to the ultimate profit paradox. A basic $4 generic medication might actually produce less net profit for the business than selling a single greeting card right at the front of the store. High-volume pharmacies often survive on thousands of these small, low-margin transactions and random front-of-store items, rather than on the handful of actual life-saving prescriptions they dispense.
The real profit centers are almost never the pills. It's those high-margin, seasonal retail items. It's medication therapy management, which is when pharmacists charge for actually sitting down with a patient to review their prescriptions, essentially selling their deep medical expertise instead of a physical product. And of course, it's administering vaccines. During COVID-19, vaccines became an absolute lifeline that completely rescued many independent pharmacies by bringing in a fresh, vital stream of revenue.
Section 5. Corporate Squeeze, Market Consolidation.
But even with those lifelines, the broader market is shifting, and the data paints an undeniable timeline of an industry under intense pressure. Back in 2010, things looked pretty stable. Single pharmacy owners were averaging over $250K in earnings. But fast forward to 2021, and nearly 30% of U.S. retail pharmacies, which is over 26,000 stores, had closed over the previous decade. And it hasn't stopped. By 2024, the National Community Pharmacist Association projected that one independent pharmacy would close every single day. And it's not just the little guys. Even massive chains like Rite Aid and Walgreens have been forced to close thousands of their own locations.
A major driver behind this massive shift is the vertical integration playbook. It goes like this. Step 1, an insurance giant buys a massive PBM. Step 2, that same company acquires a retail pharmacy chain. Step 3, the parent company now entirely controls the patient's insurance, the reimbursement rate the pharmacy gets paid, and the local competition right down the street. According to the FTC, by 2023, the 4 largest vertically integrated health companies controlled more than a fifth of all U.S. healthcare spending. It is a highly efficient corporate machine, sure, but it creates a brutal landscape for an independent business to navigate.
And you want to know the really bitter irony here? By 2030, over 70 million Americans will be 65 or older. The overall demand for prescriptions is absolutely exploding. People need these services more than they ever have, yet the independent businesses doing the intense daily labor on the ground are completely starving for cash. The demand is through the roof, but the financial model itself is just incredibly precarious.
Which brings us to a really powerful realization. What a pharmacy actually sells is trust, convenience, and access to a healthcare system that most people simply don't understand well enough to navigate alone. The pill itself, that is the least profitable part of the transaction. The true value, especially for vulnerable, rural, or low-income communities, lies in human connection. It's about having medical access and a trusted expert available to you right in your neighborhood without even needing an appointment.
So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. When the corner pharmacy closes, where exactly does the neighborhood go? It's not just a lost business, it's a lost bridge to the entire healthcare system. The hidden math behind pharmacies is far more complex than just a simple retail transaction, and really understanding it is the first step to recognizing the critical value these institutions bring to all of our communities. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and remember to keep asking the big questions.